The sound was the kind that doesn't just fill the air, it rips through it. A shrill, mechanical scream of grinding metal, followed by the wet, sickening crack of something soft colliding with blades. And then came the yelp. That awful, brief, high-pitched yelp. It was the sound that would burn itself into Elliot Parsons' memory for the rest of his life. A sound that didn't belong in the quiet stillness of Larkspur Hills, a suburban neighborhood known more for its garden club arguments than violent horror. Then he heard his daughter scream. "Sunbeam! Sunbeam, no!" He turned, just in time to see the HOA president, Karen, standing next to the still-running mulch grinder the landscapers had left running for Spring Beautification Day. In her arms, held like a bag of trash, was Sunbeam, the therapy dog Elliot's 11-year-old daughter Clara had been training for the past year. Karen was smiling. Clara, in her leg braces, was dragging herself forward across the grass, hands outstretched. "Please? She's my dog. She helps me." "She's a filthy, neurotic mutt," Karen said, her voice thin and full of venom. "She doesn't belong here. None of you do." Before Elliot could close the distance, before he could even shout, Karen turned and shoved the little golden spaniel into the feeder chute. The yelp was cut off instantly. There was a thud. Then a puff of sickly pinkish mist sprayed from the discharge pipe. And the whole world stopped. Clara collapsed on the grass, her tiny frame shaking, her hands clutching empty air as if willing Sunbeam to come back. But there was nothing left to hold. Just silence. No barking. No wagging tail. No comfort. Only horror. Elliot's legs buckled for half a second, but then something ancient and white-hot surged through him. Rage, not the loud kind but the kind that burns in silence. The kind that makes you move. He sprinted toward Karen, who now was dusting off her hands, like she'd just killed a mosquito, not a living, breathing companion. Karen turned to him casually. "Oh, Elliot, you really need to keep your daughter and her accessories under control. That thing was not a service dog. Just an untrained animal messing up our community. I did what was necessary." She almost sounded proud. But Elliot wasn't just a father. He was also a federal animal protection officer. 23 years. He'd seen puppy mills, cockfighting pits, starving horses. But this was his daughter. Her dog. And it happened 20 feet from their house. He reached her. Her smug face twitched for the first time. "Karen Brewer," he said, voice like gravel. "You're under arrest. But before we dive deeper into what happened next, I just want to take a moment to thank you for being here. If you're watching this, it's because you care about justice, community, and doing what's right, even when it's hard. We post stories like this every day, real people standing up to impossible cruelty and communities learning how to heal. So if you haven't already, please give this video a like. It helps more people see it. And if you want to be part of our growing community, hit that subscribe button. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. It truly means the world to us. Larkspur Hills was one of those places that looked picture-perfect on a brochure. Tree-lined streets, flower baskets on every porch, slow-moving sprinklers turning the front lawns into arcs of summer sparkle. It was the kind of place realtors called idyllic, and magazines labeled most peaceful towns in America. But behind that peace were the rules. And behind the rules was Karen Brewer. Karen had been the HOA president for 9 years. 9 long years. She took pride in her role, not as a leader but as a warden. The paint color on your mailbox? Karen had an opinion. The length of your grass? Karen measured. And when Elliot Parsons moved into the neighborhood with his daughter Clara, Karen took one look at them and decided they didn't fit. It wasn't just the wheelchair ramp or the faded minivan. It was Clara herself, bright, stubborn, full of questions and visibly disabled. And then there was Sunbeam. Sunbeam was a golden spaniel with ears too big for her face and a heart even bigger than that. Clara had picked her out herself. Well, kind of. After losing her mother to a sudden illness 2 years earlier, Clara had shut down. She stopped speaking to her classmates. She refused physical therapy. She barely smiled. Elliot, already overwhelmed with grief and new responsibilities, had no idea how to reach her. But then a neighbor suggested a service animal. Not just for physical help, they said. For healing. Sunbeam was the smallest in the litter, a runt, but she waddled straight over to Clara, sat in her lap and refused to leave. And just like that, something shifted. Clara began her days brushing Sunbeam. She whispered secrets to her. She started walking again, slow, shaky steps, with Sunbeam nudging gently at her side. The laughter came back. So did the light in her eyes. Sunbeam wasn't just a pet. She was a miracle. But to Karen Brewer, Sunbeam was another violation. She barks, Karen would complain at HOA meetings. I heard it from my backyard. She doesn't bark, Elliot replied. She whines when Clara's in distress. That mutt is not a legitimate service animal, Karen snapped. Just a trick to bypass pet rules. Elliot, who knew the ADA backwards and forwards, tried to reason with her. But you can't argue with someone who doesn't care about being wrong. Karen didn't just dislike Sunbeam, she hated what she represented: vulnerability, disorder, difference. She saw Clara's leg braces as a trip hazard. She called their ramp an eyesore. And once, after Clara's physical therapist parked slightly over the white line in front of their driveway, Karen towed her car. Still, Elliot tried to keep the peace. He documented incidents. He reported harassment to the HOA board, which Karen chaired, of course. He even installed cameras. But there were no rules against being a bully, and Karen knew how to push people to the edge without leaving fingerprints. The final straw came on a warm April morning, when the HOA organized its annual beautification day. Elliot had heard the rumblings: wood chippers, mulching crews, flower installations. He kept Clara and Sunbeam inside most of the morning, letting her read in the sunroom while he made coffee and finally started tackling the leaky faucet. He felt normal. Safe. But normal doesn't last long when Karen is around. The landscapers had taken a short break, leaving their industrial-grade wood chipper idling on the far side of the green, its engine humming like a monster asleep. Clara had taken Sunbeam out front, just for a few minutes. The dog needed to go, and Clara liked letting her sniff the tulips. And that's when it happened. No warning. No shouting. No accident. Just Karen. With her tight-set jaw, her plastic smile, and her HOA badge pinned like a sheriff's star. Clara told her later, through sobs, that Karen had just appeared out of nowhere, picked Sunbeam up by the harness and said, "Say goodbye, mutt." "Please," Clara had begged. "Please, she's my dog. Please." Karen smirked. "Exactly. That's why she has to go." What followed was the sound no child should ever hear. What followed was the moment Elliot Parsons learned that some monsters don't hide. They run for HOA president. And they smile while they break you. He didn't wait. He ran. Badge in his pocket. Years of pain in his legs. He reached Karen just as she was turning to walk away, satisfied. She didn't know yet that Elliot had spent 2 decades investigating animal cruelty. She didn't know she'd just committed 3 felonies in public. But she was about to find out. And that, dear viewer, is just the beginning. Karen blinked at Elliot as if he just told her the moon was made of cheese. "Arrest? You can't be serious," she said, letting out a dry laugh. "For what, Elliot? For enforcing community standards?" That dog was a menace. It barked. It defecated in public spaces. You know how sensitive the HOA regulations are. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, Elliot slowly reached into the back pocket of his jeans, fingers curling around his ID wallet. He flipped it open with a flick of his wrist. The golden federal badge caught the sun, and Karen's words stopped dead in her throat. "Elliot Parsons. Federal Animal Crimes Unit. And you just committed felony aggravated cruelty to a service animal in training, malicious destruction of a medically assigned companion, and intentional psychological harm to a minor." Karen's mouth fell slightly open. Her arms hung by her sides like ropes. For the first time, Elliot saw it, the crack in the armor. Not guilt. No. But fear. He stepped closer, voice still low. "You have the right to remain silent. And if you want to spend the rest of your life in anything other than an orange jumpsuit, I suggest you exercise that right now." She stammered. I didn't know, it was just a dog. And it wasn't even certified." "That's not how the law works, Karen," Elliot snapped. Sunbeam was an active part of a medical program. And she was registered with the state as a therapy animal. You killed her. In front of witnesses. In front of my daughter. The landscapers had begun to trickle back toward the green, one by one, their loud talking dying out as they took in the scene. Clara still collapsed on the lawn, curled into herself, the mulch chipper gurgling out its last dying rotation, and Elliot standing inches from Karen, holding his badge. One of the younger workers, a boy barely 20, looked positively green. Karen turned to them as if hoping someone might come to her defense. But no one spoke. No one moved. Elliot's radio crackled to life. "Unit 28, this is dispatch. Back up en route. ETA 4 minutes. He pressed the button. "Copy that, dispatch. Suspect in custody. Crime scene active. One minor severely traumatized. Requesting victim services unit on arrival." Karen's face twisted. "You're making a huge mistake. You don't have the authority to." But Elliot had already turned away. He dropped to his knees beside Clara. She was trembling, fists clenched, eyes squeezed shut. He reached for her gently, voice cracking. "Sweetheart, it's okay. I've got you." Her voice, when it came, was barely audible. She didn't even bark, "Dad. She didn't do anything wrong." "I know," he whispered, pulling her close. "I know, honey. She was perfect." And still that word echoed in his mind, gone. Sunbeam, her wagging tail, the way she pressed her head into Clara's chest when she cried, the way she stood alert beside her during the hardest therapy sessions, was gone. Not just gone. Destroyed. The wood chipper was now silent. But it felt louder than ever. Elliot felt the scream building inside him, but he swallowed it. He had to stay solid. For Clara. For Sunbeam. And for what was coming next. Minutes later, the first patrol car rolled in. 2 officers stepped out, young but seasoned. They knew Elliot. He nodded grimly. Weaponless felony. Witnesses present. Animal cruelty under Title 18. Scenes secure. Karen, who'd taken a step back, immediately raised her voice. "I am the HOA president. You can't just arrest me based on feelings. That dog was a danger." The officers didn't respond to her. Instead they looked to Elliot. "She killed my daughter's therapy dog," he said evenly. "Threw it into an active wood chipper." One of the officers raised a brow. "Jesus." Elliot turned to the young landscaper. "Son, what did you see?" The boy spoke slowly, clearly shaken. I saw her pick up the dog. The girl, she was begging. Screaming. Then she just dropped it. Right into the machine. Like trash." Karen exploded. "Lies. That's slander. That is absolutely." "Ma'am," said one of the officers, stepping in front of her, "turn around. I will not be treated like some criminal." "You are being placed under arrest," the officer said calmly, "for felony destruction of a registered support animal and intentional endangerment of a minor. You have the right to remain silent. We strongly advise you to use it." The cuffs clicked around her wrists, and for a moment, the only sound was Clara's uneven breathing, pressed into her father's shirt. Karen was led toward the cruiser. She didn't fight, but she looked over her shoulder once. Her eyes met Elliot's, and for a flicker of a second, there was something strange there. Not guilt. Not confusion. Resentment. Like she was the victim. Like this was unfair to her. Elliot looked away. The paramedics arrived soon after. They approached Clara with quiet, respectful gentleness, but she refused to let go of Elliot. "I don't want to go in the ambulance. I want to go with you." "You'll ride with me, honey," he whispered. "I promise." As they wheeled her toward his vehicle, the lead paramedic, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, turned to Elliot. "She's in shock. We need to get her evaluated. It's going to take time." "I know," he said. "We'll do whatever it takes." Just before he shut the door, he glanced one last time at the wood chipper. A crime tech was already stringing yellow tape around it. One of the landscapers was crying. The air was too quiet. Too clean. As if the world wanted to erase what had happened. But Elliot would never forget. Not the sound. Not the look on Clara's face. Not the feeling of arriving 2 seconds too late. And certainly not Karen Brewer, who wasn't just cruel but calculating. He didn't know it yet, but what happened today wasn't the beginning of Karen's evil. It was the climax of something she'd been building toward for a long, long time. The hospital room was too quiet. Clara lay curled on the edge of the exam table, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Her eyes stared at the wall. She hadn't spoken since the car ride. Elliot sat beside her, silent. He didn't know what to say. What could you say to a child who just watched the only creature that made her feel safe die screaming? A nurse came in and softly said, "We didn't find any physical injuries, but her blood pressure's high. Her system's in shock." Elliot nodded, jaw clenched. He could hear Clara's breathing, shaky, shallow, and it broke him more than any scream. He remembered when her mother died 2 years earlier. Clara didn't cry at the funeral. Didn't speak for days. Sunbeam had brought her back to life. And now, this. While Clara was being gently evaluated by a trauma specialist, Elliot stepped into the hallway to take a call. It was Officer Jenkins from the station. "We've started logging your report," Jenkins said. "And we're talking to the HOA board. Let's just say, a lot of folks have stories." Elliot closed his eyes. Of course they did. Karen Brewer had always been like this. Controlling. Cruel. Quietly dangerous. He thought back, months ago, maybe more. There was that time Clara was teaching Sunbeam to heel in the front yard. It was a calm afternoon and Sunbeam, still young, still learning, let out one short bark when a squirrel ran past. Karen had come marching across the street like it was an emergency. "No off-leash animals," she shouted even though Sunbeam was clearly tethered. "She's training to be a service dog," Clara had said politely. Karen had scoffed. "That mutt doesn't look trained. She looks like a yard ornament. Just wait until she bites someone. That's all you people ever do, bend rules and call it therapy." Elliot had heard it from the porch. He confronted Karen calmly at first. Reminded her that service dogs, even those in training, were protected by law. Karen didn't blink. "The HOA has its own rules," she said. "And I enforce them." The next week, a typed note appeared in their mailbox. "Your mutt is a sanitary risk. This neighborhood has standards. Your kind doesn't belong here. Your kind." Elliot remembered how his hands shook reading those words. He'd filed a complaint. The HOA board shrugged. "Karen's just passionate," they said. "She means well." But the attacks escalated. She nearly ran over Clara and Sunbeam one afternoon, reversed her SUV down the driveway too fast, swerving at the last second. Clara had stumbled backward in her braces. Sunbeam barked in panic. Karen rolled down her window and smiled. "You need better control of your animal, sweetheart," she called. "Maybe next time she won't be so lucky." Elliot lost it. He knocked on Karen's door that night, demanding answers. She laughed in his face. She darted out, "Elliot. It was her fault. That thing isn't a real service animal, it's a hazard." There were witnesses. A neighbor, Mrs. Langley, saw everything. Elliot filed a police report. He also installed security cameras. But none of that stopped her. The letters kept coming. Notes shoved under their door. Petty fines from the HOA, $100 for leaving a ramp too long, $200 for noise violations that no one else heard. Now, standing in the hospital corridor, Elliot realized something. This wasn't just bias. It wasn't just hatred. It was targeting. Karen wanted them gone. And it wasn't only about Clara. It was about something bigger. The next day, Detective Harper from Financial Crimes showed up at Elliot's front door. "We've been digging," she said, "into Karen Brewer's financials." Elliot stepped onto the porch. "You found something?" "Oh yeah," Harper said. "She's broke. Massive credit card debt. Maxed out lines of equity. Online gambling losses. And get this, she's been talking to developers." Developers. The kind who buy up entire neighborhoods, then resell or rebuild at 10 times the value. But to do that, they need people to leave first. Elliot's stomach turned. "You're saying Karen was trying to cleanse the neighborhood?" Harper nodded. "People with disabilities. Big families. Lower-income folks. She finds them, harasses them, makes life hell. And she does it all while acting like it's community standards. She's been trying to create a marketable image for a company that's promised her a cut of the profits." "And Clara?" Elliot's voice was low. "Your daughter and her dog were never just a nuisance. They were in the way. And that dog was the easiest target." He felt like he couldn't breathe. Karen didn't just kill Sunbeam because she was cruel. She killed her because she was desperate. And because Clara was a symbol of what she wanted to erase. The disability. The difference. The truth about her community. Elliot didn't say a word. He just walked back inside, sat beside Clara's bed and held her hand. She opened her eyes for the first time in hours. And whispered, "I miss her." "I know," Elliot said, voice thick. "But we're going to make this right. I promise." He didn't know how yet. But something had shifted. This wasn't just a personal loss anymore. It was war. And Elliot Parsons was ready to go all the way. The Larkspur Hills Community Center had never been this full. Chairs were packed wall to wall. Neighbors stood along the back and crowded near the doors. Whispers filled the air, some angry, some stunned, most just done. Karen Brewer wasn't there. But her lawyer was, sitting stiffly near the front. He looked like a man ready to get eaten alive. The HOA had called an emergency meeting after news of Karen's arrest hit local media. At first it had been reported as an incident. But then details leaked. A service dog thrown into a wood chipper. A disabled child screaming. A federal officer pressing charges. The neighborhood erupted. Elliot didn't want to speak. But when Mrs. Langley, the elderly neighbor who'd seen Karen try to hit Clara with her SUV, stood up and asked if someone could speak on behalf of Clara and Sunbeam, he stood. The room went silent. He told them what happened. Briefly. Calmly. Just the facts. But then he told them what came before. The threats. The notes. The fonts. The targeting. "She wanted us out," he said. Because Clara has leg braces. Because we're not her version of perfect. Then he paused. And she's done it to others. You know it. People began nodding. Then standing. One by one they told their stories. A young couple with a baby, fined for excessive stroller use. A widower with a therapy cat, written up for smells. An immigrant family, cited for non-native plants. It all came pouring out. Karen Brewer, the so-called guardian of Larkspur Hills, had been systematically driving out anyone who didn't match her sanitized vision. All while quietly working with real estate investors who promised her a cut. The board voted, unanimously, to remove her as HOA president. They froze all HOA accounts under her name, formed a new committee, and launched a fund to help Clara recover. But it didn't stop there. 3 weeks later in court, Karen Brewer was found guilty on all counts. Felony destruction of a service animal. Aggravated cruelty. Financial fraud. HOA embezzlement. Intentional emotional harm to a minor. The judge didn't hold back. Your behavior was beyond cruel, he said. It was calculated, targeted, and shameful. She was sentenced to 24 years. Karen didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared, like she still couldn't believe the world had turned on her. It had. Outside the courthouse, Elliot held Clara's hand. She still hadn't smiled. But she looked up at him and whispered, "We're safe now, right?" He nodded. "Yeah, baby. We're safe." If stories like this matter to you, don't scroll away. Hit like, subscribe, and comment justice for Sunbeam if you believe no one should get away with this. Let's make sure every Karen out there knows we're watching.